from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. China's Premier Li Qiang addresses the World Economic Forum in Davos, saying his country is open for business. Our other headlines: Iran strikes what it claims was an Israeli intelligence headquarters in northern Iraq and hits Islamic State targets in northern Syria.
It would be so nice if we could come together and straighten out the world.
After victory in the Iowa caucus, Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump says he'll resolve global conflicts. China's Premier Li Qiang has delivered a keynote address at the World Economic Forum in Davos, saying China is open for business and highlighting its potential for foreign investment. Li says Beijing's economy continues to make steady progress above the official target of 5% annual growth. This is the most high-profile Chinese delegation to attend Davos since 2017. Well, our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas is in Davos for us. Evangelo, what more did we hear from China's Premier?
And well, because it was a very high delegation from China, that's a lot of the people who were here, the decision makers and those who shape the global economy, were so anxiously waiting to hear what the premier had to say. Now, if we do break it down in one or two sentences, we'll pretty much say that China is open for business and that the economy is doing better than expected. That's what the Chinese Premier Li Qiang said here in Davos. He said that China is opening its doors even wider to the world for corporations and businesses to come in and conduct businesses with Chinese corporations, and will put aside some of those restrictions for those companies to come easily in and be able to conduct their businesses from China, as they have been doing for the past 40 years. Now, he also mentioned that the Chinese economy has grown and more than was expected, than the target that it had at 5%, close to 5.3% in 2023. And it was quite interesting, actually, what he said. He kind of compared the Chinese economy to that of the Alps. He said that in order to appreciate the Chinese economy, as you would appreciate the Alps, you need to step back and see the whole picture, to see the wide picture. That's how you're going to appreciate the Chinese economy, which has contributed, he said, quite a lot to the global growth in economic here. So let's listen to what the Li Qiang, the Premier of China, had to say.
这些年
China's contribution to global economic growth has remained at around 30%. Last year, the Chinese economy rebounded with an estimated growth of around 5.2%, beating the 5% target set at the beginning of the year.
And as he mentioned that countries need to work together for a better economic growth for the world, what he also mentioned was that the countries also need to work when it comes to artificial intelligence. When it comes to these tech innovations, we need to leave on the side restrictions, especially for those developing countries, countries that their economies are still struggling. He mentioned that artificial intelligence should be a bridge that would bring that gap closer between the high-income economies and low-income economies. Now, that needs to be the innovation of this technology, the artificial intelligence, needs to work for humankind and not against humankind. He did mention that it is something that we need to have it around the human. It should be human-centered rather than controlled. He also mentioned in his speech, it was quite a lot actually what he said, but he specifically mentioned about artificial intelligence here that it is a double-edged sword, that if it is used properly, then we will benefit quite a lot. But if it's not used properly, then we're going to see not the benefits from it. And he said that we need to establish some red lines that we don't need to cross. Let's have a listen.
China believes that technology must serve the common good of humanity. The same applies to artificial intelligence. It must be people-centered. Human beings must control the machines. AI must be guided in a direction that is conducive to the progress of humanity. So there should be a red line in AI development, a red line that mustn't be crossed.
Evangelo, we've also heard from the President of the European Commission at Davos.
That's correct. Yeah, right now, as we're speaking, the president of Ukraine is speaking, and that's what Ursula von der Leyen, she touched a lot upon Ukraine. Now, she also mentioned about artificial intelligence. She also mentioned about disinformation and misinformation, but she said that the world is facing a lot of risks. And specifically, she was talking about what was going on in Ukraine with the war in Russia between Ukraine. She said that in order for Ukrainians to continue to be able to hold the war and survive as they have been doing now, they're only doing it with the support from the West. They need the West to continue and send them money, to send them weapons, but also find a corridor to send humanitarian aid. And she specifically mentioned that if we do not do that, if their Western allies, Kiev's Western allies, do not support them in the year of 2024 and beyond, then there is no hope for Ukrainians. And she mentioned that quite a lot. Let's have a listen.
Ukraine can prevail in this war, but we must continue to empower their resistance. Ukrainians need predictable financing throughout 2024 and beyond. They need a sustained supply of weapons to defend Ukraine and regain its rightful territory. They need capabilities to deter future attacks by Russia. And they also need hope.
Well, here at the World Economic Forum, we already see that Switzerland will be allocating about $500 million. But also before that, we saw that the British government will also send about $3 billion worth of weapons to Ukraine. Now, as I said earlier, the president of Ukraine is speaking, Volodymyr Zelensky, and it's quite interesting to follow what he also has to say based on what the president of the European Commission mentioned earlier.
Evangelo, thank you for that. Our correspondent, Evangelo Tsipsas, in Davos. The United States has condemned what it calls reckless and imprecise missile strikes on Iraqi territory. 4 people have been killed and 6 injured in Monday's attack on Erbil. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said they were targeting Israeli intelligence services. There are reports of armed drones being shot down following the strikes. Iran also said it had targeted Islamic State positions in Syria, with explosions reported in and around Aleppo. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Ehsan Kavani, in Iran. Ehsan, what more do we know about these strikes?
Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei described the attacks by Yemeni forces as a blow to Israel's lifeline, saying the move was, quote, admirable and fighting on the path of God. The Foreign Ministry's spokesperson also commented on Tuesday and described the IRGC's missile attacks as Iran's defense of its sovereignty and partial punishment for harming the country's security. Mr. Kanani said the retaliatory move was part of the Islamic Republic's fair punishment for the violators of the country's security. Early Tuesday, the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps Aerospace Force disclosed details on a multifaceted missile operation against the ISIL in Syria and the Israeli Mossad Center in Iraq. The IRGC says 4 top commanders from Israel's Mossad were killed in the missile attack in Erbil. He also warned that the Iranian missiles can hit targets within a range of 1,450 kilometers. About Washington's claim of reckless and imprecise missile strikes on Iraqis' territory, I can say previous instances suggest that the IRGC's missiles have always had kind of pinpoint accuracy. Back to you.
Very briefly, Tehran has indicated that it believes Israeli intelligence is operating from the US embassy. What more has been said on that?
This is not officially announced by Iran so far. Erbil is not a very large city, as you know, and naturally the explosions could have been heard from almost everywhere, including the United States consulate building in Erbil. Immediately after the missile attack in Iraq's Kurdistan, we had reactions from inside Iraq as the Prime Minister of Kurdistan region, Masroor Barzani, asked the Iraqi government to decisively act against the attacks by Iran on Erbil that killed at least 4 people. According to Barzani, it was an obvious violation of Iraq's and the Kurdistan region's sovereignty. Baghdad, in response to the attack, also recalled its ambassador from Tehran and at the same time summoned Iranian deputy ambassador in Baghdad.
Ehsan, thanks for you. Our correspondent Ehsan Kavani in Iran. Well, China has called on all sides to abide by international law, saying that the territorial integrity of Iraq and Syria should be respected.
We call on all parties to exercise restraint, refrain from actions that would escalate tensions, and make joint efforts to maintain peace and stability in the region. We always believe that relations between countries should be handled in accordance with the basic norms governing international relations and international law, and in line with the purpose and principles of the UN Charter.
Let's bring you some breaking news. We're hearing the British maritime trade officials saying another ship has now come under attack in the Red Sea off the coast of Yemen. A missile reportedly hit a Greek-owned Malta-flagged vessel, which suffered damage, but there are no reports of injuries. This is the latest in a string of attacks by the Houthi armed group on ships in the Red Sea. And more on this as we get it. Well, as fears of a wider regional conflict continue to grow, Israel has been signalling a possible change of tactics in Iraq. Let's talk to the Associated Press correspondent, John Gambrell, who's in Jerusalem for us. John, what has the Israeli Defense Minister been saying about the government's approach to this conflict?
These comments from Israeli Defense Minister Gallant yesterday come as Israel is really coming under increased pressure from its main security guarantor, the United States. Now, what Gallant said yesterday was that the Israeli military operation in the northern part of Gaza as well as the southern part of Gaza was going to start to wind down. Now, I have to caution, though, that he offered no timelines, and this also comes as he said that Israel would continue its military campaign until it destroyed Hamas. This all has come after just months of fighting that followed Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, and in the time since, Israel has just been bombarding the Gaza Strip and conducting ground operations there. 24,000 Palestinians have been killed so far in the fighting, and the fighting continues even now. There were some rockets that were fired into southern Israel today from the Gaza Strip, just going to show that Hamas still has the ability to fire rockets, still has the ability to launch guerrilla-style attacks on Israeli ground forces using rocket-propelled grenades against their tanks and armored personnel carriers. And it shows that the suffering that the 2 million Palestinians stuck in the Gaza Strip face is likely to go on for the time to come.
John, thank you for that. John Gambrell from the Associated Press in Jerusalem. Well, let's get the view now from Gaza and talk to our correspondent Akram Al-Satari. Akram, the United Nations Secretary-General has made some of his strongest comments yet on the suffering of people in Gaza. What has he had to say?
Well, the statement that was made by the Secretary General of the United Nations is one of the strongest statements indeed. He was reiterating the fact that collective punishment in all its manifestations and ways is unacceptable. He was calling upon the two parties, and mainly Israel, to down the flames, to stop the ongoing bombardment in all different parts of Gaza. I think that statement was provoked by the continuous bombardment that has been targeting, displacing, killing, and leaving Palestinians homeless in the Gaza Strip. He wanted both parties to release the captives, and he wanted the Palestinian resistance to release the captives in Gaza. He was calling upon Israel to stop the collective punishment of the Palestinians. He was asking for unhindered access of the humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. This is one of the very burning issues in the Gaza Strip, very stressing issues that Palestinians have been affected from. He has been calling for all different actors to stop the seen and apparent signs of the slow flow of the humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. He has been in the past also threatening he would invoke the 99 article of the UN Charter that would alert all the different states and countries that there is a crisis of global implications that is taking place. The UN Secretary General was not happy for the past times, for the past 4 months, and he was very concerned about the way Israeli occupation has been dealing with the people in Gaza and the way the life of the Gazans have been affected, given the great problem of protection and access that has been affecting all aspects of life in Gaza.
Akram, thank you for that. Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari in Gaza. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, former United States President Donald Trump strengthens his bid for the Republican presidential nomination with that landslide win in Iowa.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans, grey rhinos, and unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Calls to strengthen global cooperation on artificial intelligence. China's Premier Li Qiang addresses the World Economic Forum in Davos. Our other headlines: Iran strikes what it claims was an Israeli intelligence headquarters in northern Iraq and hits Islamic State targets in northern Syria. Donald Trump has cemented his commanding position as the Republican frontrunner for the United States presidency, describing his record win in Iowa as very special. He won more than twice as many votes as his two rivals, Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. Iowa is the first state-by-state contest where Republican voters pick their candidate for the White House. Speaking afterwards, Trump urged Americans to come together to straighten out the world.
The Ukraine situation is so horrible. The Israeli situation is so horrible. What's happened? And we're going to get them solved. We're going to get them solved very fast. It would be so nice if we could come together and straighten out the world and straighten out the problems and straighten out all of the death and destruction that we're witnessing. That's practically never been like this. It's just so important, and I want to make that a very big part of our message. We're going to come together. It's going to happen soon, too. It's going to happen soon.
Let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett, watching events for us in New York. John, we're only one caucus in, but a decisive victory. What do you think is behind Trump's landslide results?
Yeah, it was a landslide. It was a dominant victory for President Trump. He won 98 out of the 99 counties that there are in Iowa, which is a Midwest state. Up there on the Canadian border, very, very cold. It was -7 below last night. We thought that would hamper the turnout. In the end, it did not. And within 30 minutes of the caucuses getting underway, the result was declared in President Trump's favor. And I should point out, this is entirely in line with the opinion polls. Sometimes the opinion polls get it right. Sometimes they get it wrong. On this occasion, they very much got it right. How did he do it. He was helped by white evangelicals and very conservative members of the Republican Party in the Iowa region. Basically, to put it very bluntly, they think that President Trump has been mistreated by the system, by the political parties and by the courts. And although there are 91 criminal charges against him, to put it very bluntly and very simply, people in Iowa who voted for him in this election think that he's been wrongly accused, that he didn't do it, that he's not guilty. I should point out he's actually in New York with us now at a court very close to where I'm talking to you from, taking part in discussion regarding a sexual assault case against him. As for last night, he won 51% of the vote. No Republicans ever come anywhere near. The nearest I could see was George W. Bush in year 2000, who polled 41%. Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador and governor of South Carolina, got 1 out of the 99 counties. So in the end, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, polled 21%. Nikki Haley, a distant third with 19%. Both of them way behind President Trump, who was 30% ahead of them. Last night, there was a casualty. I'm not sure how much overseas Vivek Ramaswamy played out. He was certainly very big here. He was trying to out-Trump Trump, if you will. He got 7% of the vote in the end. He founded the UK pharmaceutical company called Roivant in 2014. He pulled out after only getting 7% last night and immediately backed former President Trump. As for Trump, well, he disrupted the Iowa process. Normally, politicians have to go there for months in advance, go to all 99 counties if possible, get to know the people. Trump did none of that, and yet he still had his landslide last night. And finally, I think it is worth pointing out there were Democratic caucuses as well going on, but we won't know the results of those until March, when we have Super Tuesday, and that is because the Democratic Party wants to hold on to those results until then and make South Carolina, for them, the first big state, and that is because Joe Biden polls very well there. Jamie?
John, outside the United States, this is a rather opaque process. Just walk us through what happens next. It's on to New Hampshire now.
There's a tradition here. It begins with the caucuses in Iowa and then goes on to the state of New Hampshire, which is a couple of hundred miles north of New York City in the northeast of the country. The caucus is, by the way, just in one line with the Democrats. Basically, somebody represents a candidate. All the members turn up in person. They move around the room until one candidate has more voters than the others. In the Republicans' case, they do it on paper. They simply sign a piece of paper, put their favorite name forward, it's counted, and everybody goes home. But the point is you have to turn up in person. In New Hampshire, it's much more like a traditional vote where you pull a lever or you tick a box. New Hampshire is very different to Iowa as well. Many more moderate people in New Hampshire. Also, many independents as well. And the independents are eligible to take part in the primaries, even though they're not affiliated to a political party. It is one of the states which has the fewest number of Christian evangelical people as well. Abortion is not an issue in New Hampshire. On the agenda is likely to be the economy, the southern border and foreign affairs like Ukraine and Gaza. President Trump goes into this next week, of course, with massive bragging rights, having won in Iowa last night. Nikki Haley will promote her line of a new kind of conservative leadership led by a woman. The former governor of Florida, the current governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, will continue pushing his line, which is that I will be like Trump, but with much less chaos. And I do think we have to point out that it's a very long way to go. This, as you said, Jamie, quite rightly, is only the first stop on a long line of events that will take us all the way through to November of this year. It's a very, very long way to go. And I do think it's also worth pointing out that very often, whoever wins Iowa, for whichever political party we're talking about, doesn't then go on to be the candidate. Very, very often that happens. Although in this case with President Trump, it seems unlikely. It seems that he is likely to be the candidate for November and likely to come up at the moment against Joe Biden.
John, thank you for that. Our correspondent John Terrett in New York. The Japanese electronics giant is facing damning political scrutiny in the UK. Fujitsu's European boss, Paul Patterson, has been questioned by members of Parliament over the firm's role in the wrongful prosecution of post office staff, wrongly accused of fraud. The company's Horizon accounting software falsely reported shortfalls of millions of dollars, which led to fines and imprisonment for hundreds of innocent people over a period of 16 years.
Fujitsu would like to apologise for our part in this appalling miscarriage of justice. We were involved from the very start. We did have bugs and errors in the system, and we did help the Post Office in their prosecutions of the sub-postmasters.
Our correspondent Paul Hawkins has been following the story. This is humiliating stuff, isn't it? What else has been said?
So we saw that apology there from Paul Patterson, the European director of Fujitsu. In fact, he repeated the word sorry a number of times. Also, lots of sorries from Nick Reed, the chief executive of the Post Office. Paul Patterson, our man at Fujitsu, he went on to say that the company today was quite different to the company in the early 2000s, which was when this software was installed. He said we did not live up to our values. He was asked, did staff know before 2010 there were bugs in the system? His gut feel, he said, would be yes. The interesting thing here was we thought we'd get an apology here when they were asked about specific details about who knew what when during the period of time that we're talking about, which is 1999 to 2015. Quite often he said, well, I wasn't there then, so I didn't know. And that's also something that Nick Reed, the chief executive of the Post Office, said. On the issue of compensation, and that's going to be key here, because we're talking about £500 million, maybe up to £1 billion. He was asked, how much should your company contribute to the compensation bill? He said it was our moral obligation to contribute to the compensation, but we're going to wait until the ongoing public inquiry concludes, which we expect to conclude by the end of the year. That is ongoing at the moment. In fact, at the same time as he was speaking, a former Fujitsu employee, I should say, giving evidence at that public inquiry, repeatedly kept saying, I don't know, when asked about details that they knew, which drew audible groans from the audience there.
So talk us through next steps then. Where do we go from here?
So where we go from here, the public inquiry is ongoing. The holding pattern for both these organisations, the Post Office and Fujitsu, is let's wait for the outcome of the public inquiry. We should add, though, there is an investigation by the Metropolitan Police at the moment into the Post Office. So the conclusion of their investigation and whether they bring about criminal charges involving people at the Post Office, that could scupper that holding pattern from the Post Office. So we'll have to wait and see. But remember, no one has been held accountable at either organisation for what is commonly described as the greatest injustice in British history.
Paul, thank you for that. Our correspondent Paul Hawkins. The UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is facing a possible rebellion from within his own party over his controversial Rwanda deportation bill. The bill returns to Parliament on Tuesday and Wednesday, where it'll be debated and could face a critical vote. Some Conservative MPs want this legislation toughened up, while others argue it already tests the boundaries of international law. The bill wants to send people arriving in the UK illegally to Rwanda when the government says their claim for asylum will be processed. DPRK leader Kim Jong-un says unification with the South is no longer possible. He's called for constitutional amendments to mark South Korea as a primary foe. He said the North should make plans to occupy South Korea, close organisations dealing with cross-border tourism, destroy unification monuments, and sever all communication with Seoul. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, goodbye.